MestreCast, analytical chemistry software in a fast-changing world, with Santi Dominguez.
Hello everyone, this is Santi Dominguez, CEO of MestreLab, and welcome to the 6th episode of the MestreCast. Today, I'm very excited because if you have been following the MestreCast so far, you will have probably noticed that to this point, we have been talking to MestreLab team members, and that is changing today. Today, I'm actually welcoming Ben Shapiro. Ben is the Director of Digital Product Development at the United States Pharmacopeia. So kind of somewhat in some ways, we'll talk about it a little bit, maybe a member of the extended MestreLab family, but certainly not a MestreLab team member. Ben, thank you for joining us and welcome. How are you doing?
Great, Santi. Thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. And you're joining us from where today? Whereabouts are you?
We'll call this sunny Washington, D.C. for all the international listeners.
Okay, so somewhere probably not very far away from the city. Ben, and the title of the episode today, I think, is very short, but absolutely jam-packed with information. Is qNMR-based digital reference materials, which I think introduces a whole bunch of very interesting concepts, some of which we haven't talked certainly on the MestreCast. We haven't talked about certainly so far on the MestreCast. And I could ask you questions about all of it. You know, obviously qNMR, digital reference and materials, but maybe let's start from the beginning. You work for United States Pharmacopeia, and maybe we should explain to some of the listeners who may not be aware of who the USP is. What does USP do? And obviously for all those listening, hopefully you already worked out that when we say USP, we're referring to United States Pharmacopeia.
Yeah. Well, the good news, Santi, is that I think this forum is going to let you ask all the questions today. So we might be able to get into it. But starting with the United States Pharmacopeia, USP, some folks have heard of us, but a lot of folks don't really understand what it is we do. So I feel it's worth to explain that we are more than 200 years old, and we're a not-for-profit organization that sets quality standards for medicines, foods, and dietary supplements. Pharmacopeia is a funny word, but we're the official pharmacopeia for the US and about 40 other countries, and our standards are just used globally. And importantly, if USP has a standard for a medicine, it's required for medicines to meet that standard to be sold in the US and other countries where we're the official pharmacopeia.
And I guess the standard may be referring to things like formulation, main components, etc., right? So it's a definition of what the composition of the product and characteristics of the product may be.
Yeah, standard can cover the characteristics of a product, the way to test a product, the way to test the formulation, excipients, materials, your process. It can cover quite a lot. There's really not a limit because USP gets to determine what is needed for a standard to be fit for purpose. We engage with industry. We have over 900 experts who help us volunteer their time to make sure that if there's a process or a chemical standard, that it's good, that it's fit for purpose, that it can help deliver quality medicines to market.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ben. And, how would you, obviously, your role at USP is called Director Digital Product Development. What does that mean? What does a Director Digital Product Development do at USP?
Everything, but where I'm really focused is digitizing the delivery of USP reference standards, as well as launching new digital products, things that can really help folks that we work with, our stakeholders, because overall we're focused on the mission, which is making sure that patients have access to quality medicines. So some of the new products we launched, like USP-ID with MestreLab, we've launched products like the medicine supply map, to look at drug shortages. But underneath all of this is how can we take the information that we're convening and distribute it to folks who need it where they need it. There's a huge opportunity because digital is everywhere. It's ubiquitous, and we're always connected. And we use it for work, we use it for personal time, and that just means there's different levels of support that are needed. There's different opportunities for support that are available if we can digitize what we're doing and deliver it directly to the place in the workflow where it belongs.
And you've used quite a few times one of my favorite words these days, which is digitizing. And you mentioned it in the context of digitizing USP reference standards. So, maybe the questions our audience will be wanting to hear answers to are, what does that mean? Why is it important? And why are we doing it now? You already kind of referred to that last one a little bit, but maybe you can go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah. I talk about digital reference standards, and we're not there yet, but we're on that path with recent updates to our general chapter 11 in PF. But a reference standard just generally is referring to a highly characterized material or chemical specimen that is used for performing certain types of quality tests. There's nothing that says that material has to exist physically and be used as the reference. But that's typically how folks think of it. But whether it's physical or digital representation, as long as it's highly characterized and fit for purpose for the types of quality testing that we want to support, then we can say that this is a reference or a reference material or eventually even a reference standard. And this is important. We talk about digitization. Digitization is not just a fad or a trend. A lot of organizations have been transforming the way they work. They've been leveraging more technology. And the traditional work of a chemist or a scientist or an engineer is very different today than even a handful of years ago. But they're still responsible for delivering quality medicines to market, whatever phase they are in the process. And USP is still responsible for supporting those folks to do that work. When everything exists in a book or physically, we're missing opportunities to work with them alongside their work to support the digital aspects of the workflow where a lot of decision making is taking place. They're generating data, they're processing, analyzing it. Machines want to make decisions and be used in automation to help things get faster or eliminate bias. And for 200 years, we've been communicating and distributing these standards by writing a book and mailing a small amount of material to folks, because that's the best way that we had. That was what the technology supported. And that is as good as we could do, but now we can do better. And that's what digital delivery really has potential to do, is increase access to the standards content by making it available in the workflow when it's needed, where it's needed, and make them more usable, right? Support these automated workflows, integrate with technology that's doing that support work, which can just make it more useful. Then more folks can use standards, get the benefit of standards, and overall increase medicine quality. We finally have some technologies that are really compelling, I think, and that's where NMR is a technique that we're seeing increase use across industries. We're seeing sort of the access to NMR increase through tools, development of tools like the benchtop and software platforms like Mnova, right, that are helping folks to use NMR and make use of it there. But it's also a primary analytical technique. That's an important concept. I don't want to have to go into too much because I don't think this is a metrology podcast. Santi, you let me know.
I may consider that for some time later, but we keep it a bit more high level today, I think, Ben.
Yeah. But basically, NMR handles instrument-to-instrument repeatability really well, unlike a lot of other techniques, and it lends itself to the delivery of a digital reference and hopefully a digital reference standard in a way that would be very challenging for some of the other techniques. So we've got the opportunity, we've got the motivation, there's an entire space in industry that's been developing this digitization, and now we have some of the technologies to deliver into it. So it's kind of just this storm that's been gathering for a while, and now we're here to ride it.
And I guess from that perspective, being able to deliver a standard digitally is very different to delivering it physically, right? It takes away, or it deals with a whole number of challenges that the physical delivery may present. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that and tell us, how does digital help in that context? What are the big advantages that digital brings compared to physical standards?
Yeah,
I'm gonna keep asking about digital until we all get bored with it.
that makes sense. Hopefully we don't get bored. I'll try to keep it exciting, but it is really a nice opportunity because physical delivery is, if you're not Amazon with a whole fleet of trucks, right? This is a real logistical challenge for everyone. And there's just situations that I'll give an example. I was trying to get my hands on a reference standard that USP has, and xylazine. And it's a scheduled substance. It's controlled by the DEA. We have it in our facility in Frederick, Maryland, which is about 25 miles north of our Rockville office. And to get this reference standard, we need to place an order, get permission from the DEA to ship it, wait for that approval to go through, and then have specialized couriers with chain of custody drive it down to the office. Even within my own organization, this is a more than a month-long workflow with a lot of administrative overhead. If I had digitized xylazine before, getting that reference would have been as simple as an email, right? It can travel instantaneously, it can cross borders. You don't need special permission to send a spectrum. And it avoids costs associated with those kinds of specialized couriers. It avoids putting that material potentially into a hazardous situation. If it's driving on a road, there could be an accident. And you need special controls there as well. So, eliminating a good bit of the hazards associated with shipping and handling these kinds of substances, eliminating some of those administrative burdens. These are really nice, especially when we're talking about improving access, right? Scheduled materials, and that extends a little bit too to other things that could be hazardous. I look at some of our oncology standards. They're potentially very toxic. They need controls as well. So being able to instantly deliver something is nice. We love that instant gratification. You never want to wait for something to arrive at your door. But beyond that, having more items in a portfolio, being able to avoid a lot of this negative value creation associated with getting a reference, that's something that digital does very nicely. That physical can't. We look at other things too. It can't expire. You don't need cold storage. You don't have to keep testing. Is this degrading at all? Because of course it can't. Right. That file is locked in time. So there's some nice aspects where we think that this could be meaningful for folks who are using reference standards to do their quality work.
And in one of my previous lives, I was involved in the board of a company which mainly was ultimately dealing with moving chemicals across borders. And there is, as you become international, I guess this speaks to the accessibility point that you were making. The complexities of physical become even much greater, right? Because there is border controls, import, export, etc. So I guess, again, digital does away with all those limitations. Like you were very well saying, just an email and no need to convince a customs officer that there is a good reason for this digital material to make it to the other end, right? So, earlier on, you kind of mentioned NMR in the context of USP-ID and how NMR compares to some of the other techniques from the perspective of the transferability instrument to instrument or repeatability, reproducibility, instrument to instrument. So, with that intro, the obvious question is, how does an NMR tie into this story of the digitalization of reference standards?
Yeah, I mean, I said, that I didn't think this is a metrology podcast. I might have lied. It might be a metrology podcast today.
That was too tempting, Ben.
Yeah.
We did have to explore it at least a little bit.
Yeah. So a fun anecdote about standards. The primary standards, things we think of like the kilogram or the meter, are all digitized back in 2017, 2018. Don't quote me on the exact year. So what we think of as a kilogram is like a standard weight sitting somewhere in a basement in Paris under tight control. They decided they could be more precise if it was digitized. And so now it's a function of the Boltzmann constant. I bring that up, right, because NMR also is quantitative and it's a function of the Boltzmann constant. So it's related back to a standard unit, which is what makes it a primary analytical technique. NMR is, as a technique, is able to measure the chemical structure. It's fundamental to physics, it's fundamental to the quantum mechanics, it's fundamental to the chemical structure, which lets a measurement that, let's say, I collect in my lab be compared to another measurement that's collected by you and yours. All you have to do is calibrate those instruments. They're not going to be, having kind of different personalities about what they measure, right? It's possible to define these things. So NMR being primary allows for instrument-to-instrument repeatability. It allows me to make a bunch of measurements, codify those, and then send those out for you to compare against. Beyond that, there's some cool things that NMR does, like having visibility to an entire matrix of chemical components. Some of the drawbacks of other techniques might be that you need to know what you're looking for before you start. With NMR, you don't necessarily need to know that. You can be surprised, but at least know you were surprised by something you didn't expect to see, but still visible. So that unlocks a couple new exciting areas that we're exploring around free from testing, making sure that there's not certain impurities present, being able to do non-targeted testing potentially. Again, that leads to more accessibility, more usability for standards content, and really being able to see everything in a matrix. You can do simultaneous quantitation. You can effectively do multiple assays in parallel to really dramatically speed up testing, reduce analysis and instrument time for some of those more complex samples. So as a technique, it's got a lot of potential. It does some things really nicely. As a channel to deliver digital references, it's very attractive because we don't have to handle issues with instrument-to-instrument repeatability. And really important to us is the development of tools that make it more accessible. Right? You're hearing me say that word over and over because that's so important, that what we develop can be used by a broad group of people. And so the benchtop, as that keeps improving, as tools keep improving to help make use of that benchtop data, right? That's kind of a tie into what we're doing together with USP-ID. These things can lay the groundwork, lay the foundation for really nice quality based on NMR testing.
And I guess, yeah, the more we're able to monitorize NMR as a technique, the more relevant things like digital reference standards and tools like USP-ID may be as well, right? It becomes more accessible, but that also means that this maybe identity checking and purity or quantification routines are able to be deployed in many more situations. So, I agree about the potential of benchtop NMR in this context. I've also seen some new, even smaller NMR devices that are starting to get into the market, and I think they really open up the use of the technique and the applicability of these standards to many more contexts. So maybe let's talk. Okay, so this is where we talk about the Mestrelab book for a minute, because there has to be a little bit of agenda to this, of course. And we've talked about standards, which is a general point, but Mestrelab and USP just announced a few weeks ago the launch of a new software called USP-ID. And what is the connection? So obviously, with the context of digital reference standards, what is the connection between USP-ID and digital reference standards, Ben? How do they fit together?
Well, we've had this digital reference standards idea well before I joined USP, which is a little over 3.5 years ago. Some of my colleagues, Yang Liu, Mike Ambrose, were working on developing and delivering quantum mechanics-based digital reference standards by NMR. The problem we ran into was there wasn't a place to deploy those standards. So we had the concept, but we didn't have the channel for delivery. And we started working on it. And along the way, just some of the nice benefits of using quantum mechanics for NMR analysis were popping up. We were able to automate a number of routines and write algorithms to do that. We were able to essentially deconvolute overlapping signals. We were very interested in benchtop even from the beginning, because all of this work, right, it has to be connected to that access. And so as we were doing all this, we had the idea to develop a piece of software. And there was I remember the discussion of what features go into the software, and it came up, right? What needs to happen to the data before we can analyze it? And I said to the guys, there's already softwares that are doing this really well. We're not gonna replace them or be them. So let's plan and even just recommend to folks, right? Use one of those other softwares to prep the data before you bring it in. So what we were doing was processing all the data in Mnova, and then we would bring it in to USP-ID. So USP-ID was our first effort to have a channel for delivering what we hope to be digital reference standards. But along the way, it was just showing that it could help others do their NMR analysis in automation, take advantage of a lot of those, take advantage of the library, take advantage of the routines, and be able to do more work and expand the number of applications that could be accessed by benchtop. So of course, then we needed to reach out to you because hey, we're already doing this. This is already the intended workflow for a user. It would be nicer if for the user, if all of this was happening within the digital environment that they're already working in, right? That's to make things easier and better for the user. So we started talking, and it's been, I think, a very nice fit from where Mestrelab is positioned, the way its software has been used so widely and by so many, and everybody has nice things to say about it, Santi. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. So it just made sense. When we look ahead, you heard me say it right at the beginning. There's these digital environments that are set up. Everybody's digitizing. As a purveyor of standards, I believe our standards have the most impact when they meet whoever needs them, where they need them, when they need them, right? So that's going straight into the digital workflow. Mnova, or however things develop now that Psi is is in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
There are these digital environments. I really am excited about delivering directly into those environments. That's a way to support the users where they're doing their work. And I think Mnova is just one of those places where people already were, right? They're already doing their work. There's a lot more tools than just the kinds of quality testing that we want to provide, but it can be there. It can be there for them. It can be much more accessible to those types of users. So that, I think it just was a really nice fit at the beginning to support the workflow in USP-ID, but I see a lot of potential long term for delivery of these kinds of methods or tests directly into, an environment like Mnova or similar tools. I have to be agnostic. USP is a nonprofit, so we would deliver it anywhere, but it's a nice tool, a nice place to deliver into.
Great, and by obviously by using the Mestrelab environment, you also leverage a whole bunch of potential capabilities, and you made reference to SAI, which is now the Mestrelab parent organization, which is very focused on not only digitization, but my other very favorite word at the moment, which is automation. And there are, obviously, the more we're able to automate, I think, these routines, the more we make them accessible to users where they need them, and irrespective of the level of NMR expertise that the users have, which is also, I think, very, very important from that accessibility perspective. So, obviously, we've talked about the reference standards, we've talked about USP-ID and how Mestrelab and USP came together to deliver that, which for us is a very exciting project, and we're also very much enjoying the collaboration, by the way, Ben, and I should say so in the podcast. What does it mean in your mind, all this process, the things we talked about today, what does this mean for the future of standards? So what do you see standards going? And we're looking back 200 years, so maybe I won't ask you 200 years in future, but where do you see standards 10, 20 years hence?
Yeah. 200 years in the future might be a little far. I always tell folks, when they ask me about my roadmap, beyond 5 years, I'm making it up. Things are going to change. Things are going to change a lot. But we've been seeing these trends. We've been seeing all these opportunities, and now we're finally taking steps to really address challenges that folks experience when they want to use standards, and opportunities that exist to leverage new and more and different technologies. And I really feel one of the roles of standards is to make a technology more accessible to folks in the market, right? One of the things that we do is take the time to make sure that this technology is suitable, this test is fit for purpose. Once we've done that work, others can also adopt it without having to do all of the research and development that goes into it upstream. And so just being able to use more technologies like NMR is a potentially big impact of this approach that's going on to digitize the standards and the delivery. We didn't get to fully touch on it, but maybe a topic for a future talk on automation. Automation and standardization very closely linked, right? You have to be able to take something routine and say that this is a process that you're going to run over and over and over. Defining that and making sure that the process is suitable is almost an act of standardization too. So there's these big opportunities to help accelerate the work that scientists are doing. That just haven't been available before, but I'm excited about right now. Beyond that, though, I would like to see those different technologies gain adoption. They each do some really unique and interesting things. So right now, a lot of the testing is done by HPLC, and that's a very good technique. But it can't do something like free from testing or non-targeted testing. And so that's an opportunity where maybe a different technology that's standardized could step in and really deliver new value, and raise the bar for quality. So as we figure out new ways that these technologies can be standardized. I hope that means more folks will use them and deploy them so that overall we're improving quality in ways that are important to protecting patients. And then I always think back to a story that a scientist told me about at the time we were talking about particle sizing. And so the reference technique there was light scattering, dynamic light scattering, which, without going into, because this isn't a metrology podcast, has some issues with correctly or accurately sizing particles. But he said, it doesn't matter, right? The reference technique is how I'm judged. It is the meter in Paris. I need to be able to demonstrate that. And he was working in automation, working in process analytical technology, and wanted essentially light scattering in line. I think one of the unique aspects of USP is that our standards oftentimes are donated. Folks can develop a good method and then donate it and submit it, and it can be considered for inclusion in a compendium. I'm really excited about the intersection between NMR and process analytical technology and automation, right? Somebody wants the reference technique in line, right? That's how they're judged. But there's potential. We look way ahead at automation and real-time release testing. NMR is a technique that I see could have potential to be there, right? If we're talking about standards based on NMR, then why not standards in line that are still based on NMR? Being able to run that reference technique in line in full automation could really be a dramatic step change for getting quality medicines to market faster. And so that would be a big step change, but it requires first broad adoption of a technology, growth in the industry to be able to integrate it in line. And so, finally, the last bit is really around how folks access standards. So describing a future where there's computers accessing them would be a pretty dramatic change in line, in automation. But fundamentally, where there's chemistry going on, if it has an impact on the quality of a medicine, I would like to support it somehow. And standards can be a nice way. The reference standards can be a nice way. So there's a big potential as all of these platforms keep growing to deliver standards into those different specific workflows, dramatically increase their applicability, the usability, and ultimately the impact in making better medicines available. So that's it. Just a small vision for the future. Don't hold me to it.
No, but I think obviously everybody will marry your ultimate stated objective, which is to make better medicines available faster, right? And that's something we can certainly all get behind, I think. It's interesting because you talked also about the manufacturing process, about bringing NMR in line, our process analytical technology, which I think becomes particularly valuable in context of continuous manufacturing, which are becoming more and more widely used in the pharmaceutical industry. And from that perspective, Bruker / Sai are also very aligned with your vision. With Sai, a part of Sai is a company called Optimal Industrial Technologies, which delivers PAT solutions for continuous manufacturing, and we have just added NMR to the range of techniques that can be used within that platform. And I think that very much speaks again to the confluence of vision between what you guys are doing and what we're doing. And standards will be very important again from that perspective. Ben, I think it's been really enlightening. It's amazing to see that ability to take what I think by definition is an extremely physical concept and to actually turn it into a digital concept that can be used anytime, anywhere, to kind of paraphrase a little bit Bill Gates, I guess. So thank you very much for coming and sharing this vision with us. For our audience, I would actually really recommend that there are some materials on the Mestrelab website around the use of USP-ID, and I think also some demo videos, and I would really encourage people to go and take a look at that. Anybody who has any interest on NMR and or on reliably measuring related to standards should take a look, because I think some of the functionality that you guys have put together between the Mestrelab team and you, it's really, I think, mind-blowing when you come at it from the background of pure NMR and the complexities that that technique may have had in the past, So I would really encourage users to go and take a look at that. Apart from that, thank you very much, Ben, for sharing your time with us. Thank you also to United States Pharmacopeia for the collaboration and for freeing you up to come and talk to us about this. And I look forward to maybe future discussions later on in the MestreCast. You already suggested a couple of subjects, so I may well pick you up on that and have you back at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back, Santi. It's fun talking.
Great. Likewise, Ben. Thank you very much for your time. All the best. You can find all MestreCast episodes at iVoox, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. And you can, of course, follow us in our Mestrelab media channels on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So please follow us, share us, and we look forward to seeing you attending future episodes.